This podcast may contain explicit language. Pardon me, but your husband is showing. Gilda is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
Are you sure?
Positive. 62 years, yes, I'm pretty sure. Last time I looked in a mirror, too.
Okay. I know it says that on a lot of certificates and various different things, but okay. Just making sure.
You have access to my CV.
That is true. Although it hasn't been updated in almost a year again, so, you know, there's a possibility.
It was updated last October.
I thought it was July, but whatever. Tonight, for our 309th episode, we discuss Gilda from 1946, celebrating its 80th anniversary, directed by Charles Vidor, written by Marion Parsonet and Ben Hecht, cinematography by Rudolph Mate, music by David Mendoza, editing by Edward Michael McDermott, starring Rita Hayworth as Gilda Munson. Or Munson? I hope I'm pronouncing the D in there. Whatever. Glenn Ford as Johnny Farrell, George McCready as Balin Munson, Joseph Calleja, again, I hope I'm getting that correct, Detective Mauricio Miguel Obregon, Stephen Garay as Uncle Pio, Joe Sawyer as Casey, Gerald Moore as Captain Delgado, Mark Roberts as Gabe Evans, Ludwig Donath as German. They didn't even give him his own name. Don Douglas as Thomas Langford, Lionel Royce also as German. Okay. And George J. Lewis as Huerta. Background for the movie: Gilda was released on April 25th, 1946. On a reported budget of $2 million, Gilda would gross $3.75 million in rentals and finish as the number 20 film for 1946 in North America. At the time, the film was mostly panned by critics, but it has undergone a critical reclaiming in the modern era and become a cult classic. Rita Hayworth's performance in this film was a primary inspiration for the iconic animated character Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988. Specifically, Hayworth's appearance, the song Put the Blame on Mame, and her hourglass figure influenced Jessica's design, hair, and stage presence. Hayworth later came to resent the film and its effects on her image. Hayworth once said with some bitterness, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." This quote was referenced by Anna Scott, the fictional actress played by Julia Roberts in the film Notting Hill. In 2013, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. It currently holds a 90% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, of course, we cannot do this by ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest, an award-winning author and podcaster, and now joining the illustrious Five Timers Club, it's the Scribe of Scream's Queen. Please welcome back VP Morris.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back and to join the very exclusive Five Timers Club. And I also can't wait to talk about this because, as you guys know, I mentioned this film like 3 years ago on one of our first or second recording, so I'm glad that you actually did put it on the list, and here we are.
I try to live up to my promises at any turn and event. I think the two films you specifically mentioned were The Shining, which you came back for your second appearance, and it was pretty quick after your first one for Scream, and this was the other one. And because we do mostly anniversaries, we had to wait this one out, but it is now on the schedule. We're finally here. So, the first question has to become, why Gilda?
So I absolutely love this movie so much, and it's one of those where I wish it gets more recognition in the film community. I mean, I think a lot of people who are film buffs know about it, but they're not as obsessed with it the way something like Casablanca from this time period gets sort of held up as this beacon of like, oh my god, this amazing piece of cinema history, which I think it's maybe not as good, but it's very close. And so I just stumbled upon it watching Turner Classic Movies when I was in high school, and I just absolutely was mesmerized by how captivating Rita is in this performance. She feels so alive, and the camera absolutely loves her. Anytime she's on screen, it's like she's glowing, even though everything is in black and white. You can just tell she just sort of like pulls people in. And I like the very dark subtext that's going on, and I like that they hate each other and we don't know why. Like, I really enjoy that it doesn't actually ever get into their backstory, but I think it makes that a little better because everyone has a person in their life, romantic or otherwise, that they just like don't like, and you can kind of put that on their relationship, and you can understand why they're so kind of like passionately hating each other at times, because if it was just explained away, then we could kind of, I think, separate ourselves from it a little more. So I just absolutely loved this. I also love noir in general, and I think this is one of the better noir films that came out in this time. And I like that it's not as crime focused the way most noirs do have. Like, it's more about a murder or getting away with something, where the two main characters are not directly involved with crime.
Now, you put it completely on my radar because I had really never heard of this film before you even brought it up a few years back. Dad, did you have any relationship to this film prior to, I guess, this week?
I had two pieces of relationship to this movie. One, I was familiar with it and kind of knew Rita Hayworth. And two, and this is what I do when I'm talking about this film and people are unsure of it, the scene in Shawshank Redemption where Rita Hayworth comes up on the screen and he tells Red, that's what I want. I want a poster of Rita Hayworth. That's from Gilda. That's the scene where she's introduced, and it's iconic, and I knew that from that particular circumstance.
So obviously she's gotten some more modern recognition coming back around due to the popularity of that film, which currently ranks inside our top, I think, 5 on the greatest movie of all time podcast show list. But this is an interesting film to delve into. So let's start here. We've now all seemingly mentioned Hayworth's performance. You said she was glowing. I'm not sure what I make of her in this film. It's very much an actor's film. I don't think that the plot, to me, is nearly as strong or cohesive, but it's just people being kind of stars. She's got a very strong presence. Glenn Ford's got a very strong presence. They've obviously got this backstory, and the chemistry between them, I guess in some ways you could say it's like a negative chemistry because of the animosity that's flowing backward and forth. But what exactly about this performance has become the stuff of legend? Because frankly, this movie probably is the only thing I would say is probably keeping her somewhat relevant 60, 70, 80 years later.
Well, I think, part of it is she is basically one. I mean, she actually did I believe the word bombshell is because of her. They put her images on the shells they dropped in World War II, which she didn't like because she didn't want to be associated with killing people. So she kind of is the archetype of this Hollywood bombshell, even though there's obviously Marilyn Monroe and various other women who have met that standard before. But it's very clear that she is beautiful and sexy and charismatic. But I also think that even though that's what we kind of see her as, and when she's on stage, the 2 times we see her on stage, that's what everyone kind of remembers, both the audience like us or the characters in the movie seem to see that the most. But I think she does a good job of being angry, depressed, and manipulative. Like the first scene of when she realizes that Johnny is working for Bellin, she is being so manipulative and like she's basically emotionally blackmailing him, and the way she's just able to throw in very subtle digs, and that the audience knows already that there's something between them without anyone having to explain, oh, they used to love each other, and oh, like, there's a lot of modern movies tend to do that with like exposition dialogue, and there's no need because you just the way she says her lines, you get that already.
Dad, not having really seen this film before, what did you think of the two lead performances?
Well, I thought Hayworth's performance was wonderful. Glenn Ford was good, and I always liked Glenn Ford, but I don't think it's really Glenn Ford's best performance. I thought he's done a lot of other films that have been better, but he was solid in it. But let me put it this way, okay? I stopped to think about this, and I looked up her filmography. Hayworth did a ton of movies. She took some time off because during the early 50s when she was married to Ali Khan, and because of the marriage and him being a Muslim cleric, did not want his wife to work. When the divorce happened, then she got back into films. I think she's been vastly overlooked because of her sex appeal. I would create her kind of like John Wayne always had the tough guy image, so no one ever paid attention to whether he could act. And it was until late in his career that, True Grit came around and Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and a couple of those films. People said, maybe he can act. With her health started to deteriorate in the 60s and early 70s. I think if she would have been able to have a longer career, I think people would have possibly come around to realize how good of an actress she really was. Because she did some pretty good films where she was the female lead late into the 50s, working with some pretty high-level actors. So I think that that's part of the problem with this. And I think it's part of the reason why this has become so much more iconic is because people have looked at some of those films and said, she really can act. And she was not just a pretty face.
Yes, I agree with that too. Kind of just a side note, if you guys ever have the time, or any audience member has time to watch Tonight and Every Night, that also has Rita Hayworth in it, and she's a much more mellow. She's still a performer and a singer, given that's what her strength is, but she's not a femme fatale, and there's a lot of more emotion and sadness because it's being in London during the Blitz. So I recommend that if anybody wants to see another side of her. She's not always like the bombshell.
I wish I would have written it down, but she did a film in 1947, I think, with her husband, Orson Welles, which is considered one of Welles's best films. And I cannot remember the name of it. But she had to dye her hair blonde, and Harry Cohn was absolutely apoplectic because he created this image of her as the auburn, bombshell. And she had to have a bob cut and blonde, and so she didn't look like herself. And again, the level of acting was considered fabulous in that film, but wasn't really popular.
So that does take us to an interesting thought about her character in this movie. You brought up the term femme fatale, which I think most people would probably say this is an example of that. But the way that she vacillates between various different power dynamics within the film, I think you could say that there are many different ways in which she could be represented. She could be the femme fatale. She could be a victim of the men in her life, specifically towards the end where Glenn Ford's character, Johnny, gets the upper hand on her for quite a while. Or is there some kind of like additional label or character that you would put on her here?
Well, I feel like she's a femme fatale, like into the second degree, or maybe a femme fatale by circumstance, not by her own original motivation, because as far as I can tell, she doesn't marry Balin to get back at Johnny. It seems like this is supposed to be like a star-crossed, fated encounter. So as far as I can tell, she's moved on with her life and is sort of looking for a rich, stable man to kind of provide the life that it seems like Johnny was unable to provide for her. And she is not going out of her way to seek him out. Where there are other noir films like Double Indemnity where the femme fatale character, that is her motive. Like from the get, she wants to destroy her husband or this man in question or both, and that's been her drive from the very beginning. It seems like only when that fated encounter of realizing that Balin is his boss, that she realizes, oh, I can kind of get emotional payback for whatever wrong he did to us in our original relationship. So in that way, she is making a choice to kind of go after him, but it's not her number one motivation. I think her number one motivation is she does want to be loved by like a stable partner, but is kind of choosing revenge more than that. And also I do think she is a victim to the fact that, like, obviously at this time marriage was much more oppressive. You couldn't just get out of it the way, no fault divorce was not a thing, and it seems like Argentina has much more stricter laws from what they discuss, given that it's a more Catholic country. So by that, yes, I'd say she's a victim, but I think she's kind of this weird combination of both, like a femme fatale, but not entirely of her own choice.
She has a certain quality of being vulnerable, but yet aggressive and, I don't know what the word would be, domineering at the same time. But then you look at her life. I don't know how far off she was playing. She got into show business because her father made her his dance partner. He controlled her looks, how she behaved, what she did on the stage. She left her father to marry Edward Judson, who became her first manager, and then got her signed up. She ended up with Harry Cohn, who ran Columbia Pictures, who was a dictator, who controlled every aspect of her, changed her hair color, told her how long her hair could be, dictated what film she was going to be in, completely controlled her. Their relationship was so hostile, she sued him multiple times. She refused to go on sets that he put her in at times. He's fined her, suspended her. She leaves him, goes to Orson Welles, who she considered and said was the love of her life, but who was a complete control freak and dominated her to the point where she was almost suicidal by the time of her divorce. She then marries Ali Khan, who was a high-ranking member of the Muslim faith, leaves him to go to Dick Himes, who was another control freak, a singer in the 50s, and then ends up finally with James Hill. None of her marriages lasted more than 4 years. And then by the time she was in the early 60s, she gave up and just stopped getting married and stopped really kind of associating with men. And she kind of had a quiet period of her life for the last 20 years. So she surrounded herself with a bunch of men who were quite literally assholes. And I think it had an effect on her, and it probably made her performances much more raw because she could draw from the experience of some of these guys that she was now hanging around with and who tried to completely control her whole life.
Well, you said that her father kind of started this cycle, and a lot of women either look for partners that are very much the characteristics of their father. If her father was such a control freak and then she just pursued those endlessly, I mean, is it really that surprising? It feels fairly Freudian.
Well, even one of her early partners in Hollywood, she was teamed up with Fred Astaire doing dance films in the early 40s. And Astaire was controlling of every aspect of the dance performances.
Again, like, how far deep do you want to go on this? You're just banging the drum on the same exact points that, much in the same way that this movie, she's attracted to men who are ridiculously controlling. I don't know, maybe it's more true to life. Is that your point here?
I think that there's a blend here. I think part of the reason why she's so effective is because I think she's able to draw from her own life some of the anger and bitterness of what's going on around her, but at the same time, these are men that she loved, and yet she has feelings for them, but is angry at what they're doing to her. And a lot of her films were all in those characteristics. So I don't know if it was Harry Cohn specifically putting her in those films because he knew what was going on, which is possible.
Well, before we get too much further, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. In the shadowy world of post-war Buenos Aires, a cynical gambler named Johnny Farrell Glenn Ford, rises to become the right-hand man of a powerful casino owner, only to have his world upended when his boss returns from abroad with a new wife, Gilda, Rita Hayworth, the woman Johnny once loved and lost. What follows is a volatile triangle of desire, jealousy, and deception where every smile hides a threat and every gesture feels like a dare. As Johnny and Gilda wage a private war under the watchful eye of a dangerous man, the film turns into a noir about obsession, control, and the impossibility of burying the past.
Thank you, Dad. All right, so what is the movie about?
Well, to me, I feel like it's about two people that have unhealed emotional wounds from their past relationship, and instead of being adults about it, they decide to basically play a very long cat and mouse game where they kind of switch who's being the cat and who's being the mouse until they end up together under very strange circumstances.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree with that. These two are very emotionally unhealthy. Like, clearly. To what extent? We don't exactly know. We don't even really know if they've healed enough at the end. They just kind of like accept that this is their lot and that maybe they should be together by the end of the movie. I mean, the thing that moves Johnny at the end to accept that he wants to be with Gilda is fairly minimal compared to the maze that he's put her through the course of the film, particularly the second half of the film. And I don't know. I mean, nobody would have told him earlier on, hey, stop being a douchebag and run away with your wife or, whatever.
Well, I think Uncle Pio tries. He tries to reel him
Fair.
in. We'll get to it, but he's one of my favorites. But, like, he makes part of the movie for me because I think it needs to have someone break the tension of, like, what is wrong with you people? Which is basically what he's trying to do the whole time. So, yeah, they're unhealthy. They can't let sleeping dogs lie. I think they take, like, slights against them more personally than, like, Johnny and Gilda don't have the ability to, like, let bygones be bygones, or just realize, like, okay, you did bad stuff to me, I did bad stuff to you, can we just, like, call it a draw? But no, it's like they kind of get into a cycle of revenge, which I kind of think, it doesn't specify, but I think after the movie concludes, I think that this kind of thing would just continue. Even if they stay together, they're still going to just be kind of one-upping each other with, like, power dynamics until one of them dies, I think.
Well, this is clearly a situation where you can only kind of speculate. Something happened in their relationship, and they both have let the bitterness that developed from that eat them up inside. And they cannot get past it. And they are so angry yet that they manipulate, control, and do anything they can to destroy the other out of retribution for the pain they experienced. That's what it's about. And everybody else just gets caught up in it.
That's a question I had during the course of this film, and I suppose I should have just let this exist until remaining questions. But one, how long ago before she ends up getting married to Balin did she leave Johnny? Because I could see it being 5 years ago. I could see it being a few weeks before this movie starts. It seems like it could be anywhere in that period of time. And then how long is this movie? Like, in a full timeline, does this happen over the course of months? Are we talking years? Is this like a decade? Because I think there's a lot of things that pass that it probably needs a good gap of time.
Well, you have the war to kind of give you a guideline, because the war is going on and the war ends. And the war ends not far into the fact that Johnny is now the right-hand man of Balin. All right, so my guess is, and this is the way I would interpret it, he fled the country either for one of two reasons. He fled the country to avoid the war or the draft, so he ends up in Argentina, or he fled the country to avoid Gilda. And either way, he's probably there not long after the breakup. Maybe the breakup happened because he didn't want to go into the war. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. But I think he was a down on his luck gambler who ends up in Buenos Aires looking for ways to make a living as a gambler down there when he hooks up with Belen. And then I would assume that given the circumstances, we're talking maybe 2-3 years before the war ends or within that time frame. And then within a very fast period between the time the war ends and the end of the film, I'd say within 12 to 18 months. Because otherwise the Germans wouldn't be there trying to get back their patents.
That makes sense. So my theory about what happened before is I think that he is like, a professional con man, because clearly he's using loaded dice. So I think he has probably multiple tricks up his sleeve, and that the way he made his living was these types of sort of illegal doings. And he probably met Gilda because she's a professional dancer at some sort of, nightclub where she's performing. And my theory is based on some of the innuendo in the film is that if you recall, there's a moment where Belen asks, "Did you teach Gilda to swim?" which I think is like an innuendo for sex. So I think that Gilda might have decided to sleep with him or even live with him before getting married, which was more of a bigger taboo at the time. And I think he was tomcatting around on her, and she then kind of decided to either like leave without a warning, which was like a big, insult to his ego, or maybe she started like flirting with other men in front of him, even if she may not be sleeping with them, just to get at him, because clearly he kind of has like a prideful problem. And I think he might be running not just from the draft, but maybe he did something and he's trying to evade the law. Like he's good, the word's gotten out that he is a dirty gambler, that he's gonna pull strings on people, and he should be, he's doing con jobs on people and he needs to get out of the country. So also he could have been in other countries before Argentina. It's not really specified. He could have been in Mexico. Like it's not just like United States, Argentina from what I gather. And then I think about your timeline is correct of like a year or two from like start of war to end of war working with Belen, and then the end, or like the marriage to the end of the film is like probably a year and a half, give or take. So she has enough time to kind of pull all of these like cheating stunts, because she kind of burns through men really quickly, and it almost looks like she's meeting a new guy every night, which I mean for Rita Hayworth maybe she could because she's that gorgeous, but I don't think it's literally every night. I think we're probably seeing like gaps, like a few weeks at a time. There's another man, a few weeks there's another man that she's trying to, get Johnny jealous over.
Well, I guess part of it is that even after Belen dies, I feel like there's a longer period of time after that before he comes back. And that's got to be, at least in my mind, it felt like a longer period of time, at least like a year. Because she would have had to have gone, or at least be for a few weeks, not going down to meet Johnny, and then finally she gets over her pride and goes after him, and then she's kind of back and forth under his control or whatnot for a while, and then leaves, and then it takes some time, and then comes back. So, I don't know. They never really allude exactly to the timeline of this. It was a curiosity of mine. Did you know? There is a rumor that this film is the only time Rita Hayworth's real singing voice is heard, but that is not true. According to the bonus features from the DVD, Hayworth actually never recorded her own singing voice and was a talented lip syncer. Anita Ellis dubbed almost all of her singing in this film. Hayworth always wanted to do her own singing, and Columbia Pictures chief Harry Cohn paid for her voice lessons, but she never developed a voice he considered strong enough to be used. Hayworth remained bitter about that for the rest of her life. I mean, sure, I get it. Did you know? Humphrey Bogart declined the role of Johnny Farrell in what was to become a classic film noir. He reasoned that, with gorgeous Rita Hayworth playing Gilda, audiences wouldn't look at anything else. I mean, is this movie better if it's Bogart? Or is it just like you add another one of these to his shelf? Because it feels like this is almost stereotypical Bogart.
I think it would have been better, because I think Rita Hayworth completely, at times, dominated Glenn Ford. And I had a hard time believing Glenn Ford as being at her level of control and manipulation. I think Bogart would have played it much more up, and I think it would have been a real test of wills that would have come across on screen.
See, you've been very hard on Glenn Ford already, and I guess we'll wait for performances, but I simply don't agree. Did you know? Glenn Ford was hesitant to slap Rita Hayworth in one instance, but she and Charles Vidor both convinced him to just let it go. He did, and even Hayworth was stunned at the effect. I don't know, maybe he's a good guy. He just didn't want to slap her.
They were close friends. They became friends and they remained friends most of their lives.
You always gotta steal the thunder.
Sorry.
Did you know? The script was not yet finished when filming began. According to choreographer Jack Cole, quote, the script pages would arrive practically the morning that we were going to shoot. They were making the picture up as we went along. If you really look, you can tell that was the way the picture was done because it doesn't really make any sense if you try to follow the story. With some of that, I agree. It's not a plot film, it's an actor's film. Did you know? Rita Hayworth died from complications of early onset Alzheimer's in May of 1987 at the age of 68. One of her pallbearers was Glenn Ford. Now you see what I'm saying? You stole the thunder in advance. You just can't. Anytime you've got an anecdote.
Yeah, well.
Anyway. Finally, did you know? Harry Cohn was worried about bad publicity affecting Rita Hayworth's box office pull. Her marriage to Orson Welles was a constant worry for him. Hayworth and Welles were, in fact, in the middle of one of their separations during the shooting, and the gossip magazines were full of stories of an affair between her and Glenn Ford. When the two weren't filming, the mogul would barrage the duo with angry phone calls and demand that Hayworth go home. Cohn went so far as to spy on his actors he had recording devices set up in their dressing rooms. He got no useful information, though, as Ford later said, "Of course we knew our dressing rooms were bugged. The sound department tipped us off." Welles knew of the hidden mics when he returned to Columbia to make The Lady from Shanghai from 1947 with his estranged wife. He said that he and Rita would perform impromptu skits and radio shows in their dressing room for the benefit of their listeners. How does that fit in with your understanding of Cohn there, Pop?
He would make a fascinating study in and of itself. A book about him would be just... You'd have to be... It will only sell to real cinephiles, but man, that guy was a piece of work.
Honestly, I think you could probably do a fairly good movie on most of the early studio heads. It's just going to be X-rated.
Could be. Could be.
Between him and Jack Warner and... Why am I drawing a MGM Mayer? Louis
B. Mayer. Yeah.
Took me a second there. But anyway.
Well, and you still would have a chance to interview somebody close because the actor Bob Balaban, his uncle was the head of Paramount.
So that looks like a good spot for our first break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 310th episode, we welcome back CLP contributor and the host and creator of Cinemas, Mike Emmel, to discuss Yojimbo from 1961, celebrating its 80th anniversary. Written and directed by Akira Kurosawa with Ryuzo Kikushima and Hideo Aguni, cinematography by Kazuo Miyagawa, music by Masuro Sato, editing by Kurosawa, starring Toshiro Mifune, Tatsuya Nakadai, Yoko Tsukasa, and Isuzu Yamada. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. If nothing else, tune in so that you can see all of my pronunciation butchering next week.
Take a class in Japanese so you can pronounce them better.
Okay.
You got extra time.
Yes, there's that oodles and boodles of additional time now as I go into finals. I'm just staying off the class message boards because I can't deal with everyone freaking out about the property final.
It's best that way.
I know.
The cacophony of law school interns or classmates is ridiculous.
And I don't even really need to score that highly because I did fine on the midterm. So, whatever. Anyway, Let's check in with our guest, VP. What's going on with you? Where can people find you, and what have you been working on?
So I still have 3 books available on Amazon: Shadowcast, Dead Ringer, and The Devil We Used to Know. So you can just go and check them out. I'm in the process of writing another book, but it's not going to be out for a while, so I don't have anything new to promote right this minute.
Okay, so we'll have to bring you on for your book tour then.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Any other shows or audiobooks or anything of that nature coming out?
No, not right now. I still am trying to get an audiobook for my most recent one going, but some audio files got corrupted, so I had to put it on the back burner. So hopefully in the next few months I'll be able to resurrect that project and get the audiobook out. But as of right now, I just have my 3. The first 2 are audiobooks, but getting the third one out has been a bit delayed.
Okay. Well, we can look forward to having that hopefully whenever you're next on with us.
Yes.
Not currently scheduled for the rest of the year, but I'm sure we'll have you back at some point here in the near future to work on your 6th episode. But you shall enjoy your hat soon, and hopefully you'll be able to wear it with us the next time, so then you can join the hat club. Although it's not a yellow hat, so you can't join that ranks this week. But
Technically, mine's gold.
okay. I mean, it looks the exact same shade mine does, but whatever. Moving on, we left off at best performances. Dad, who did you have down?
I had Rita Hayworth.
And in a twist shocking no one, I also have Rita Hayworth.
So I have her as my best secondary and most charismatic, but I do not have her as my best performance.
Ooh.
So I will let both of you just expound on why you had her as the best first.
Well, I mean, she basically does make the movie. The movie doesn't exist without her. I mean, sure, there could have been another actress to pull it off, but it's just so very much in Rita's DNA to be Gilda, to the point that, as you'll eventually mention, that people just conflated them in real life all the time. She really knows how to take control of the scene, and whatever the emotion is expected, she's able to capture that. There isn't a time where I feel like she's not doing what is expected or feeling the emotions that Gilda is feeling. And I actually like when she is going a little crazy, like in the moments where she's behind closed doors and she's sort of venting her feelings and kind of like throwing herself down on the bed. She's doing a great job of that, and not just being the seductive woman who dances with other men or who puts on a little show. She's able to sort of capture all of these different facets of who she is and just sort of play it very well. She's able to sort of switch between them beautifully.
And we mentioned this a little bit before, that she's very good at both playing the cat and the mouse in this movie. That she likes toying with Glenn Ford, Johnny, for the good portion of the first half of the film, but she's also good at being kind of the entrapped one, the person who's pushing back against the confines of their cage rather well in the second half of the movie. So I have no issue with her being best performance, but this is where I'm going to necessarily disagree with my dad, that I have Glenn Ford as the best performance, because every part of him in this movie, to me, I feel the seething hatred, the anger, the animosity from him at every single turn. It is so palpable that it begs the question, how do you get to hating someone so much? Like, did she chop off one of his testicles? I mean, that's about the equivalent here.
Well, that heals.
You can't regrow a testicle, Dad.
It heals, though. I mean, this is emotion. I mean, something happened big time. That she apparently, I don't know if it's a cuckold situation.
It
that would
feels that
probably
way.
be one of the things that would set the guy off, especially a 1946 man.
Well, and to VP's earlier point, that he's a guy who's very much controlling and got this significant ego, for him to be made to look weak, or that she's with somebody else. I don't know if he could ever stomach that.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean, Ford's performance here I find to be enriching, engaging, and this is very much, it's a two-handed, I guess, with McCready being the third wheel, more or less. And I don't think McCready does a poor job either, but it's a very much a two-handed movie between those two. And if either of them is bad, or even just mediocre, I don't think the thing works, which is why I have them for all three of my performance nominations here.
But the reason I have Hayworth is that she's the emotional, I don't know, server. Everything comes off of her, or her behavior, or her reaction. So I think she is the central thing, and everything kind of tentacles out from her. But I have McCready as my secondary performance. And the reason I have it is talking about a guy who spends the entire film being borderline creepy. Oh my God. I mean, you just know there's something more there, and you're just waiting for the creepiness to come out. And it ultimately does, but still.
It's that tone of voice, the way he just delivers certain lines and he's kind of got this almost snake-like face that he feels like the serpent in the garden just trying to tempt you to do things.
And I don't know if they did that makeup on purpose, but between the white hair slicked back and his general pallor, he just looked almost like he was like a voice coming from out of nowhere, because there was almost nothing he could do as far as facial expression. It was just, everything was monotone about his looks and his presentation, but it was delivered in such a way that you just kind of went,
VP, who did you have as your secondary?
So I had Glenn Ford for my secondary. So I think he does a very good job, but I don't think he's the absolute best. Like, I think Rita is the star. There's actually there was a trend a while ago of reimagining old movies with modern movie posters, and the person had Glenn Ford sort of looking into the distance, and then above his head in neon lights is Gilda, and it's kind of like her presence is like overshadowing him, and like it's very clear he's looking at her performing, and I just felt like that's the dynamic. Rita's number one, and he's sort of under her and like reacting to her, and maybe someone like Bogart might have been a slightly better pick for intensity, but I like that Glenn Ford is about like 15-ish years younger than Humphrey, so I feel like he has that sort of inexperienced or like younger man sort of impulsivity, where Bogart at that age would probably be like 40 something, may not be as willing to sort of fall under the spell of some, weird old guy with a knife cane who just tells him what to do. That feels very like a 20-something-year-old guy who's down on his luck just like took the first job he could get. Whereas someone like Bogart by his 40s would be like much more of an experienced criminal if he's in that way of life. So I think maybe his acting chops might have been better, but I like that Glenn Ford, even though he is intense and he has hatred and desire for Gilda, he also is very sort of younger and reactive, and he's making these sort of impulsive decisions that make sense for like what I'm guessing is probably their first relationship or first like serious breakup that they've experienced. So I think he does a good job. It may not be the absolute best performance in all of noir history, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, I know we don't do this on this show really that much. I can't really imagine too many other people fitting the description that you need to have at the moment in like the 40s to be able to play this part, because Bogart had a certain quiet strength that he could play a tough guy, even though, I don't know, he kind of wasn't, it was somewhat in between. But I can't see like a James Stewart or a Cary Grant. They don't fit this role because, one, they're a little bit older, I think, to begin with. But two, they're kind of plain. They don't have that tough guy attitude, the look, the you don't want to cross me kind of thing. And I think Ford does have a bit of that to be a convincing con man grifter type in the movie. I just don't know if you were to do like a modern remake, who would exactly fit the archetype of that right now, because I can't think of anybody that's immediately going to come to mind that if you got a true starlet, let's say like a Sydney Sweeney type, where they're the it looks girl of the moment kind of thing, who you would get to play opposite her. I guess because they've already been in a movie together, the immediate one that comes to mind, and I know this is a little bit controversial since he hasn't made as many good movies lately, but Glenn Powell. But I don't know. It's a tough casting.
Maybe. I would actually pick Margaret Qualley for Gilda.
Oh, sure.
Because
okay.
she is a professional dancer, and I think she is a better actress than Sydney. Not that I think Sydney's getting a lot more hate than is deserved, but I don't think she's like the most talented actress in the entire world. She's not horrible, but she's not like, she's not a Meryl Streep. All right, let's all just be honest. But I think Margaret Qualley could actually, and has like similar acting chops, and could pull off this sort of like. And she has in other roles between like seductive to being sad and depressed and angry. She's done all of those things where other roles tend to get or other women have gotten more pigeonholed, I think.
Glenn Ford part could be played, and I'm drawing a blank as to his name, Frankenstein.
Jacob Elordi.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of who I thought too. Because he is, I didn't see Wuthering Heights because I think it's a crime against humanity what was done to it. But, sorry, they're not wearing pleather. I'm sorry, my Kathy and Heathcliffs are not wearing pleather. But he is able to be like handsome and charismatic and also threatening. So I think that would be a good one. I'm not sure who would be a good Balin, who's like a bit older. Maybe Clooney if he decided to get back into it.
I'm trying to think. I can't think of his name now, but the guy who played Han Solo in the, prequel Solo film, Alden Ehrenreich, I actually think would pull off it because he can play it a little bit younger yet, even though, he was in Weapons last year and he was playing a little bit older. But the one drawback that I would have to Qualley is, has anybody really heard her sing?
Yeah, but Rita's not singing. So she doesn't have to sing.
Fair. I just wonder if because of the singing part, it goes to somebody that's like one of those ex-child Disney star types, like a Zendaya.
I have a beef with Zendaya. I don't particularly care for. I don't think she's as talented as people say she is. And I just don't think. She's very beautiful, but I don't think she has like bombshell energy. She has like a different, like a model energy, which I think could be good for other roles. I don't know. I think I don't have a problem with dub singing. I think sometimes you just have to work with what you got, and sometimes you don't have a very good singer, and you have to just make what's due.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I suppose we could pose that out to the socials and whatnot for feedback. Maybe somebody else has some better ideas than we do, because I put everybody on the spot here. But most charismatic, I assume we all have Hayworth?
No, yes. Actually, I have Stephen Gary as Uncle Pio, because I had to.
Sure.
Rita's getting so much love, I knew she was going to get talked about. Just because, also I don't like to double up. Because he is obviously comic relief, but sometimes comic relief can be like stupid or annoying, especially at this time in history where they're kind of almost like court gestures. But his comic relief is really good because he's also making really cutting remarks about human nature and about their relationship that Johnny in particular like doesn't want to hear, but he needs to hear it. And I like that he's always calling him the peasant. And I enjoy when he's trying to give the Germans pig masks for Carnival. It's just, I think he has a really good presence, and that even though there's very powerful actors on screen, I'm paying attention to him when he's making his little quips.
Do you have any idea, and I guess I must have missed this, why he keeps calling him peasant?
So I think the thing is that he sees people for what they are. So at the beginning, which I have under the quotes, that gorgeous woman walks by and Johnny wolf whistles and goes, "Who is that?" And he goes, "A harpy." And then Johnny says, "Well, what do you characterize me as?" And he goes, "A peasant." And it's because I think Johnny never lives in his own power, not to sound too like hippy-dippy crunchy about this, but he is easily sort of like tossed between two powers, a Balin or a Gilda. He doesn't sort of live in his own sort of strength, and it doesn't have to be financial strength, that he's sort of like always doing the bidding of another person. And so even though like technically Johnny at this point is probably making more money than Uncle Pio, who's like a janitor slash bathroom attendant, Johnny's not in possession of himself. So I think he's kind of like, even after Balin dies, he's still doing like the bidding of a dead rich man. He's like not even doing his own life. So I think that's the point he's trying to make.
Okay. I was just curious because I didn't know if they had actually explained it in any one time, and so I was trying to think about it, and it's not the most descriptive name or one that you like have certain characteristics immediately like associated with, but all right. Let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here, and I assume that both of you will have some additional ones to nominate, but I have Meeting Gilda, so the first scene that's fairly iconic with her in the hair flip. Then I have Munson Walks In, which fast forward to basically about 2/3 of the way through the movie where they finally recognize, hey, we have attraction for each other again, and he walks in on them before he commits suicide. Then I have Gilda on the Run, which is when she leaves to go to, is it like Paraguay or something? I don't remember. Anyway, then Put the Blame on Mame. So the obvious seminal performance where she's with the band in the club. And then I have finally the final scene where Munson returns. Now, I assume that each of you will have some additional ones to nominate here.
Yeah, so I have Disaster to the Wench, when she's sort of being forced to drink to her own demise, which I think is actually kind of the first time Johnny is able to manipulate her, because up until then, she's basically manipulating him through their first interaction, and this is their first like dinner and drinks together as the three of them. And Johnny then realizes, oh, I remember she's superstitious, so I'm going to get her to like do this thing that's going to freak her out. And also when the man, I forget his name, the short man with the goatee commits suicide, kills himself with the gun. When they dance together during Carnival, where she's dressed as like a bull master. And when you have Gilda on the Run, are you referring to when she's singing Amade Mio?
No, I'm more referring to when she leaves Johnny for that period of time, and it feels like she's involved with another man. He's going to help her get it annulled.
Yeah.
That sequence,
okay,
where it's all just part of the further manipulation.
Okay, I'm going to add, because like it's around that time where she's in the white dress and singing, because that's one of my favorites. Also, a little backing up, it's Put the Blame on Me, but it's the first time with the guitar in the middle of the night with Uncle Pio, because I like that it is sort of, it reverberates back into the future, that it's not like something that she just came up with on her own. She has been thinking about the song for a while. So those are mine.
Okay. Dad, did you have any others to add here?
Saving Johnny Farrell. The opening scene with the gambling and then the muggers.
Okay.
Because I think that really kind of introduces Balin and Johnny and sets up how Gilda's going to get involved and create tension between the two of them.
So I think I have these all here. I might not, but there were a lot that are thrown out. I think I have 9 in total here. So Saving Johnny, Meeting Gilda, Unplugged, which is the first acoustic guitar moment, Disaster for the Wench, Carnival, Munson Walks In, Gilda on the Run, Put the Blame on Mame, and Munson Returns. Did I get them all?
Did you have the guy shooting himself, the gambler?
No, partially because
You don't have that, but
does anybody know his name?
I'll find it. You could just put the crooked gambler. I don't know. That's one of the problems with the plot, which we'll get to, is that like all of what Balin is supposed to be doing is like very unclear. So like even though I found it to be like, it cuts some of the tension because it sort of shows that what Balin is doing is like deeply impacting people's lives. What and how he's doing it is just like clearly just made up on the fly, as we've learned from how they were writing the script.
All right, so I'm just going to label that suicide then, so
Yeah.
that we don't have to spend, a scads of time trying to figure out what the guy's name is, because I think on Google it lists him as like German cartel guy. Okay, but anyway. So out of these, what is the best scene?
It's the black dress, put the blame on Mame version. I feel like it has to be, because that's the lasting legacy of this movie.
I thought long and hard about doing that one, and I figured one of you would end up having it, so I went with something else, and that's just Gilda on the run, because they do kind of pull the wool over your eyes thinking that she can get out from under Johnny's control, only for it to just be further manipulation. And I just like kind of the setup for that, because it's one of the few times where it feels like there's like a more creative plot actually going on, that they're using multiple scenes to set something up. But that's just me.
I'm meeting Gilda. It's such an iconic scene with her, and it becomes the point where she's now the focus of the film and remains the focus of the film to me, and just kind of sets everything up. So that's where I think the power dynamics of the film change.
And that's why I have it ultimately as my favorite scene, because you do start to see some of that palpable emotion between them, and it kind of takes off from there. Until she's there, the film feels like it's floundering a little. Like you're kind of understanding where things are going, but is Johnny really that interesting by himself, or does he need some sort of foil to make this entire plot somewhat more interesting? And it takes her, 15 minutes to get into the film? I think there's a good chunk of time before she's even involved. What was your favorite scene?
So I have the acoustic version of Put the Blame on Mame, which I think is sort of underrepresented, because I think it's the time that we're kind of seeing Gilda without the pressure of being either a bombshell or toying with John. She's literally just sort of amusing herself, and Uncle Pio is there sort of listening, and he's clearly sort of, he thinks she's pretty, but he's not being like a lech or anything. And I like that there's a moment where she's having like a positive interaction with a man that isn't like seduction or revenge or control. Like Uncle Pio is just like listening to her softly sing, and she's not putting on the big performance that like the first two, or the two big ones towards the end that we see where she's sort of taking up the whole space. She's just sort of softly singing, and I think the song is about her, that she's the cow that everyone blames their problems on. She's like, both of the men are blaming her for their problems in life, which I don't think she is the main cause of. So I think it's sort of the core of her in that scene, or like the more quieted version of her.
It is certainly a captivating one, because I do think, even if it's not her singing voice, just the way that the singing and her body movement is drawing you into that. And it's very quiet, it's very understated, and so it's just got this, in kind of the same way that an unplugged performance would normally have kind of this, I'm trying to think of the right word, it's not poetic, but kind of a poetic spell on you. Dad, what was your favorite?
I had Putting the Blame on Mame, the big version, in large part because I realized when I was doing some of the research how the censors had such a difficult time with that scene, because they wanted to say you can't do this because it's a strip tease. But it came right to the edge where it wasn't really violating anything. And so they were having this difficult time. So I thought that was, in and of itself, fun and interesting, because they went right to the edge without going too far and making an iconic piece of the film.
And it's ultimately why I have it as the most indelible moment, because, as was mentioned before, it is the iconic thing that everybody thinks about, because it's been relayed in other pop cultural moments from the 80s and 90s that we now look on fondly, and as a result, this has kind of been incorporated among the modern era.
I'll disagree with you on that.
Did you have a different indelible moment, VP?
Oh yes, I have meeting Gilda because I think that's where this whole thing kicks off, and it might not be the most recognizable scene from this movie or from this sort of genre, but it's basically how their dynamics are going to play out for the next hour and a half that's left of this movie, that they're going to be cat and mousing each other, and she is going to be making him uncomfortable socially for a significant part of the movie, and I like that she's able to sort of do that really quickly off the bat.
So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry in the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 277 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. So, let's jump into best funniest lines then. I will take the first one up here. Gilda. Hate is a very exciting emotion, haven't you noticed? Very exciting. I hate you too, Johnny. I hate you so much, I think I'm going to die from it.
Balin, it talks when I wish to talk, it's silent when I wish it to be silent.
Johnny Farrell. Statistics show that there are more women in the world than anything else, except insects.
Gilda. I hate you so much that I would destroy myself to take you down with me.
Johnny, who is she? Uncle Pio, a harpy. Johnny, and how would you classify me? Uncle Pio, a peasant.
Johnny Farrell. You're a lucky man. Bellin. I make my own luck.
Johnny Farrell. Pardon me, but your husband is showing.
Johnny, you would think a bell would have rung. I would have had some warning, some instinct, but I walked right into it.
Gilda. I can never get a zipper to close. Maybe that stands for something. What do you think?
Gilda again. They said that being married to Johnny Farrell was like driving a car with no brakes.
Balin, Gilda, are you decent? Gilda, me? Sure, I'm decent.
Johnny Farrell. I thought we agreed that women and gambling don't mix. Balin Mudson. My wife does not come under the category of woman, Johnny.
My last one, Johnny Farrell. You have no idea how faithful and obedient I can be for a nice salary.
Johnny, does it bother you at all that you're married? Gilda, all I want to know is, does it bother you?
And I'm out.
I have one more, but the problem is I can't remember which one of Gilda's lovers it is because she has so many of them. The one towards the end. For a long time, I've taken husbands in small doses. I've developed immunity to them.
All right. So let's move to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out to today. So roughly 1951 to today. What is the legacy of this film as shared between two equal yet separate groups, the industry and the audience, 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second here?
I'll go second.
All right. On an industry level, I think there are some callbacks to this film, but if you started naming significant actresses of, let's say, the golden era of Hollywood, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s kind of range, how far into it would you go before somebody actually named Rita Hayworth? I think she is somewhat forgotten, and by that extension, this film is kind of with her. It was not one, like I said, when VP had mentioned it to me a couple of years ago, I hadn't even really heard of the film before. I had heard of Rita Hayworth, but I didn't really know her from anything. She may have been in some decent films, but just nothing that has like the name recognition or the staying power that's there. But that being said, it is in the National Film Registry. It has kind of gotten a reclamation behind it of critics in the modern era. It is somewhat of a cult classic, so I will say it's at a 3.5 there. The problem I have on the audience perspective is even the name Gilda, I don't know if it resonates quite in the same way of mentioning Rita Hayworth now, and how many people even know who she is. Whereas, go back to, a few decades, I'm sure there are a lot more people that understood who exactly she was. But there's something where I think she's just been somewhat lost to time. So because of that, I do wonder how many even cinephiles have actually gone out and seen this movie. I think the fact that it is in the Criterion Collection and has this restoration project that was done around it helps it a little bit, but I'm going to say that's a 2.5, so I'm at a 6 overall.
For me, I agree with you on the industry. But I would add one other factor, which is I think this really kind of launched. It took a while for Glenn Ford to really hit the ground running, but I think it did send up his career throughout the 50s and early 60s. So I'm going to add that to the equation. The public, again, I'll tell you, the number of times I've mentioned Gilda and said, I'm not familiar with that. And I go, remember the scene in Shawshank Redemption? And they'll go, oh, yeah. I mean, that's the reference point everybody has. And I don't think that there are that many cinephiles who really are familiar with it. Now, I agree that the rise of the popularity has been done in large part because a lot of very famous actresses have really championed its rise. And I think it's because it speaks to them. So I'm also going to agree with your 2.5 for the public, because I think when I stopped to think about it, I originally had a 2, but I'm going to go with your 2.5 on that as well for a 6.
Okay. So 2 6s on the board.
So, I don't know what it is, but I've always felt like this movie is more famous. Maybe I'm in a weird, bubble or something like this, but I feel like part of the problem is it may not be the movie itself, but it's like this archetype is something that we all recognize still. So even if the average person doesn't know Gilda or Rita Hayworth, this sort of like manipulative, seductive jazz singer is kind of a archetype that she perfected, and we see in tons of movies going forward. Like even Cameron Diaz in The Mask, I would feel like is kind of almost a reiteration of this Gilda type person. So it's difficult because like maybe the name or the actual scenes itself may not be known the way a bigger movie from this time might be known, like Wizard of Oz, like everyone has seen it. But it's hard to sort of quantify the archetype of this sort of like noir femme fatale that's also is the dancer or the performer or the seductive one, because there's kind of a femme fatale that's sort of the mastermind archetype of the crime that's sort of a bit different. So for legacy, I gave it a 4 just because of the for industry, just because that archetype kind of, it's like a stamp. It just kind of kept getting repeated throughout time, and that we kind of see it and know about it, and like the word bombshell is because of her, but it may not be from that movie. But it's also, I don't know, maybe I've just met more people who know this movie better. I have no idea. It's like maybe there's just sort of different chunks of cinema nerds that know it and don't know it. For audience, I'm going to give it a 2.5 because it isn't a household name. It isn't as easily, identified, where I feel like the average person knows who Marilyn Monroe is, but they may not know who Rita Hayworth is. So I think that's where I'm going to land on that.
Okay. So that is a 6.17 average between the three of us. Let's move to impact and significance. This is a measure of pretty much the same thing as legacy, except it's for the initial 5 years, so 1946 to 1951. What is the impact and significance among those same two groups, the industry and the audience? 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to lead here?
Yes. The industry at the time did not care for this that much. I have a tendency, because I'm a subscriber to the New Yorker, to look back at the New Yorker a lot and see what the thing. Their critic thought it was just run-of-the-mill, didn't think much of it. The New York Times critic didn't like it very much. and it didn't do it. It struggled. So, but again, I do think that it kind of built at least some momentum in Rita Hayworth's career, and I think it started Glenn Ford's career. I'm going to go with a 2.5 for the industry because of that. And the public, it was the 20th film, I believe, is what I thought domestically. That's not huge. It would have thought that Rita Hayworth at that time would have drawn a bigger crowd than that. Post World War II, she was the number, or was either between her and Betty Grable as the number one pinup poster for soldiers in World War II. I would have thought there would have been bigger than that. So the best I can do on that in the public is a 2.5 simply because it's 20th. It made money, but I don't get why it didn't do so well.
This is one where, and there were some conflicting numbers with the international box office, and so I didn't put it. If you include that, the estimates are somewhat closer to about 6 million instead of 3.75. And so it's like 3 times its overall budget that it made back, but it still didn't creep into the top 10 in the given year as far as I could tell. And again, going back any time before basically the mid 60s for box office is really a crapshoot. Even before the 70s is really difficult to use that as a true barometer. I do think there are some iconic images and some things that lived with her specifically for the rest of her life. If you want to say that Glenn Ford becomes a bigger star, both of those I think those to be somewhat true, and because of that, I am a little bit kinder than you are necessarily on both sides of this. So I had it at a 3 for the industry because, yes, some critics panned it. I don't think it was universally panned. It was somewhat mixed, and I think that has a lot to do with the script than anything else. But that being said, I had a 4 on the audience, so I had it 7 actually.
I'm glad, because I have a 3.5 for audience for impact and significance, because part of it is I got into older movies because of my grandparents who were big cinephiles during this time in history, and when I said the name Gilda to them, and mind you, they were like in their 70s at this point, so it's obviously more than 5 years, it was like they lit up. They were just like, I know Gilda. Like, it was just sort of like it had an impact. So obviously I couldn't know how they felt about it when it was fresh, given that they were much, much younger. But the fact that it had been like 50 something years since they had seen it by the time I had saw it, and they just like lit up with this like excitement of, oh, I remember this, and I remember the black dress, and I remember the posters, and like, you know, that she was like the biggest deal of like the pinup thing. So even if the movie wasn't like the biggest deal at the box office, her, I guess, stage presence was sort of felt around at that time. So I think that if it was really not that impactful to that audience, that the people who were in their 20s or teens at this time would have forgotten about it. Just like, you know, if you saw some movie in like 2005 that was meh, and you're in your later years, you're not going to be like, oh wait, did I actually see Meet the Fockers 2? I don't. Like, you're not going to light up about it. So I think that's why I put 3.5, because like, sure, it may not have lit the whole world on fire, but clearly the people who saw it or were under her spell, I guess, at the time, culturally, remember it. And then I just have a 3 for industry, because I feel like, yeah, it wasn't hated, but it wasn't loved, and it did set off. I mean, it's now her most famous role. We have the whole quote about her, you know, they went to bed with Gilda. So, and also Glenn Ford had, you know, I think a very prominent career, and this movie helped. I feel like he probably would have still had a really good career without it, because he just worked so much. He has like almost like 100 movies on his IMDb. So I think it did sort of set off something, but it just wasn't the biggest thing in the entire world.
So that is also a 6.17 average between the three of us. Let's move to Novelty. This is a measure of the originality of anything having to do with the film. Usually it's about the plot or the subject material or maybe the way in which it's made, but it could be about other things as well. And then the execution on anything in the movie. 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. I guess I'll lead off here. This is where I'm going to claim some level of ignorance. This is a tough spot to be in because to lead off and basically say, for an originality standpoint, I don't know if there's all that much that's original about this movie. I mean, it's certainly on the tail end of like the heyday of the noir films, the gangsterish kind of era of films, stuff that was a little bit abroad. I mean, obviously Bogart had done a few of these films. We discussed one a few years ago with like Key Largo, and then we've had kind of this spate of films. Is there anything particular that you would put out and say, yes, this is like the unicorn quality, that other than Rita Hayworth and the iconography surrounding her specifically, I just don't know what to put there. So maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to move this after the fact, but for right now I have a 1, and I feel bad about it, but that's what I got. As far as an execution, the script doesn't work really that well. I think we've kind of come to that understanding. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the cinematography, but it's not like a wow type of thing. The choreography is pretty good for what minimal amount that they have. Really, what saves the movie is the acting. I think there are engaging characters in this, but it's not enough to reach, with all of those foibles and flaws, a full 5 on this. So on the strength of the acting, I'm going to say a 3.5 and a 4.5 right now.
For me, for the first category, I'm going to go with 4 because I'm judging it within the noir category. So the problem is, if you judge it as a movie against all other movies, then it doesn't stand out that much because it's also very hard in general. I mean, there's nothing new in this world, as we know. But I think it may have a lot of noir tropes, but it isn't a paint-by-numbers noir. There are gangsters and, like, questionable dealings, but that's not the main thing. It is about the messed up relationship between the characters more than it is about the crime, or is it about the, like, I guess the duality of man, which sometimes comes up in other noirs. There isn't a detective. There isn't, like, a wife who's trying to screw over her husband in the typical sense. Like, Rita's kind of, or Gilda is kind of screwing with Bellin, but that's not her drive. She probably would have been a fine wife if Johnny hadn't showed up. She probably just would have been like, meh, I'll just take his money and be rich and happy. So I think within noir it is more unique. Like Mildred Pierce, for example, is considered a noir, but it's very unique within its genre because it doesn't have a lot of those tried and true things. So it may not be as unique as something like Mildred Pierce in noir, but it isn't just like a boring, oh, there's a detective and a hot chick and they're doing crime.
Okay.
All right. For originality. Oh, I'm sorry, you done?
I'm sorry, no, I forgot about the other part of the category, the execution. I put it at a 2 because the script is a bit of a mess and needed another pass, and also that the code is definitely keeping it neutered a bit, because I think we could have used a bit more adult content to sort of explain their hatred for each other and probably give it an even darker ending, or like not a quote-unquote happy ending. But I do think that, like, it is very aesthetically pleasing and the acting is very great, so that's why it's out of 2.
All right. For originality, I was thinking, oh, this isn't that original. Then I stopped to think about it. What's original about this? We have a bunch of very chauvinistic old white guys running Hollywood, and they did their utmost to make women sub-characters in films. This film, the number one person in this film is the actress. And I could think of only one other film that predated this where the dominant person in the film was the actress. That was Double Indemnity with Barbara Stanwyck. I couldn't think of too many others that was that much. Since then, how many have there been? All About Eve.
Sure.
Faye Dunaway in Network.
So let's just
And
take...
then
We've
put
already
in
mentioned The Wizard of
Kathleen
Oz.
Turner in Body Heat.
Has a lead actress. Gone with the Wind. Mrs. Miniver. I mean, just to throw out a few off the top of my head.
I'm talking about where the person
Not to mention It
is,
Happened One Night.
I'm talking about where they're in control of people. Not just the fact that they were the dominant character, where they're manipulating the men in their lives, and that they are completely the badasses of the films.
And she doesn't die either, because sometimes when that did happen, they were then met with death as like the punishment for being the more, I guess, masculine woman or more evil, quote unquote, woman. So yeah, I actually kind of agree. I mean, I think there are other strong women in film, obviously, but I do, but again, like bringing back noir. Noir does have a tendency to be a bit chauvinistic, and having her A, survive, and B, not be seen as like this horrible like wench who is just out to kill men is good. Like she actually gets a relatively sympathetic portrayal because we see the emotional turmoil she's in, being under the thumb of both Balin and then Johnny. So yeah, I actually do agree that is a bit more novel.
So I'm going to go with a 4 for originality. As far as execution, yes, the script is a mess, but I'm going to give it positives on the acting, on the direction, because actually the fact that this is watchable means the direction had to be pretty good. What he was able to get out of the performances. The casting was excellent. I mean, I don't think there was a clunker in any of the casting. The editing was not bad at all.
The two German-looking characters didn't look that German.
Okay, what, they're supposed to be blonde and wearing lederhosen?
Take for it what you will.
So I'm at a 4 for the execution. And I have to give it a full point down because the script was garbage. So I'm at an 8 overall.
You had a 4 for the originality? Okay. All right. I will say, I think in light of hearing that, I'm going to move mine up to a 2.5 on originality, because I guess you guys hadn't really said it, but at least the conversation had me reconsidering. There are not too many romantic films where the two characters downright, I mean, there's a playfulness where sometimes they don't get along or they don't like each other or whatever else. I mean, the kind of Pride and Prejudice tropes, the shop around the corner type aspect, what Meg Ryan made her entire career on. But there's never outright like seething hatred and just utter manipulation and constantly toying with the other person in the way that this film is. So I'll grant that up. So it moves me to a 6 instead of my 4.5.
Instead of them being enemies to lovers, they're just enemies and lovers. Like, they're both at the same time. They never graduate from one to the other.
Yeah. So that's going to make this a 6.67 between the three of us. Let's move to classicness. This is a category that lives in the gray because it's got all sorts of nuance and little aspects to it that not everybody who hasn't listened to 300 episodes can account for. And so we turn to our senior nuance correspondent who loves to live in the gray, Dana.
That's correct. That's why I picked my profession. So, starting at the 6 and working my way up, I just have to give it at least 1 point up simply because of the fact that we have just a real great role by a badass woman in dominating a film. So I have to give it at least 1 up. And as far as classicness, you could put this, hopefully with a better script, you could release it now and it would still work. So I'm going to give it a full 2 points more for that. So that puts me at a 9 overall. But even though, the slap bothers me, And I understand, and it was part of the film, and it was done with the idea that, that was necessary in order to further it along. So I'm not going to give it a big bump down, but I'm going to give it a half a point. So I'm at an 8.5.
I knew you would mention the slap more specifically, and it is a major and significant plot point in the movie. The reason why I'm not going to give it any points down is, yes, and we had this conversation last week on The Public Enemy, that it was somewhat more culturally and socially acceptable, but I'm not trying to excuse it on that end of it. It's that it becomes kind of the lynch point in the movie where Glenn Ford, he has been so ruthless and maniacal about trying to get his revenge on Gilda. But the minute he slaps her, he just seems to like, all right, I've got it out of my system almost. That he feels like it's almost a how far did I really go? Seeing her reaction of, you've now inflicted the physical pain as well as the mental and emotional turmoil that you have through the rest of the film. And because it's that significant of a moment that he feels remorse, I'm going to let it slide on that. Now, we started our 6, as you mentioned before, because the midpoint is slightly higher than in other categories, just from the standpoint, usually with older films, it is easier to take points off than it is to add points usually back on. Because there are things like violence against women that are much more commonplace in these. Or there's blackface for no unearthly reason. Or there's Germans that you know to be Nazis, but they can't say that they're Nazis, type of stuff. I don't have any particular points to take down on this. I think there's nothing about the film, with the exception of maybe the slap, that I feel like really is problematic. Being in black and white, it helps paper over a few things as well. But even that said, there is some level of diversity in the cast, which is unusual for the time in which it was said, because they actually had to get Spanish-speaking actors somewhat to be in Argentina. So even with that, I think there's a +1 for timelessness. I gave it another point for iconography, so I'm at an 8.
I'm going to go with 9. I feel like there's a reason why it is being preserved by all of these film guilds, why, people who are actors do seem to have a reverence for it. And yes, there's obviously some misogyny, not just the slap, but, like gambling and women don't mix, and just like a few other inclinations that like women aren't as smart or as like rational to control themselves, which, I mean, Johnny's kind of acting rational the entire time, which is ironic, but I do think it's pretty, like, it still holds up pretty well. There isn't any like blatant racism or mockery. I kind of wonder, maybe is the man who shoots himself, I kind of feel like he's supposed to be Jewish, but I can't really tell. Like, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like they don't say it, but it's kind of like, oh, he's a money lender or something, that's sort of implying he's on the outskirts of the society and he's doing some kind of like illegal money, he's in bed with the crooks, and then he like can't even live without the concept of being, wealthy or in control of the money. So I felt like that could have been like a little iffy, but it's not explicit, and it's not to the point where I don't think it's like overtly offensive. And I think it just holds up very well, and I think most people would be entertained by this movie in general.
Okay, so that leads us to an 8.5 average between the three of us. All right, let's move to rewatchability on this category. Insert your own subjective test here. That's usually why we defer to our guests first. This is one of your favorite movies, VP, so somewhere in the high 8, 9, 10 category, I would assume.
It's a 10.
Okay.
Rita's a 10, and this is a 10. So, like, it's 10 all around. There's never been a day where I'm like, I don't want to watch it. Obviously, I don't watch it regularly, but if somebody was like, hey, want to watch a movie? It's Gilda, I would never say no. It's always a yes. I always want to see this movie. And there are times where I think my memory is deceiving me, where like I went to watch it, for this, and I'm like, maybe I'm not gonna like it as much. Maybe it's been a while. Maybe my younger self liked it, and then as soon as she's on screen for the first time, and I'm like, oh no, I love it. I still love it. I will always love this. I will never not want to watch this opening scene ever. The one where she's with Val and Johnny for the first time. Like, she's just so magnetic and in control of that situation without it being obvious. I'm never gonna not want to watch this. And I think even though the plot can get a little weird, it's not so convoluted that people would be like, oh, I don't understand what's happening, or like I can't make heads or tails of what's going on.
So all of that makes sense. I think that now, having discussed this might be a better rewatch film than it is an original watch. I think part of the downside of only having watched it the one time, and I meant to kind of at least like go back and watch some select scenes or something if I had time, and I simply ran out of time, is that the first time through you're so focused on the plot, and the plot is it's not really relevant to the enjoyment of the film, that because it is so to the side, that the second time through, when you don't have to focus so much on where is the story going, where are all the individual things, you could just focus on the characters more, and it can become that vibes film the more often you kind of watch it on repeat viewings. So on an initial viewing, I would say this is probably at a 5 from an objective standpoint, but I think on a rewatch, I'm going to put it at a 6.
I actually want to watch it again, and probably watch it with your mother, because I think she would enjoy it.
If you wait a couple of weeks, you can watch it with your in-laws.
Yeah. I'm going to go with a 6.5, because this is going to be on a rewatch loop. It's just not going to be something I'm going to watch like every year or every other year. But I'll rewatch it every couple of years, every 3 years or so on a loop. I mean, I think it was a good enough film to rewatch, and quite frankly, I was kind of mesmerized by Rita Hayworth, but I think a lot of guys were at that time too.
Well, thank you for the easy math on that one, because that puts us at a 7.5 for this category between the three of us. For audience score on this one, we had an 8.45, because we had 81% for Google users and an 88% for Rotten Tomato users, so that leads to the average of 8.45. So, to repeat the categories here, we had a 6.17 for Legacy, a 6.17 for Impact and Significance, a 6.67 for Novelty, an 8.5 for Classicness, a 7.5 for Rewatchability, and an 8.45 for Audience Score, giving us a final total of 43.46, and currently placing it on our list between My Fair Lady and Ocean's 13 for 196th on the list out of 277, 78, somewhere in that range. So, not in the middle quite, but it's not near the bottom, which only a few select films can get near the bottom. But, all right. Interesting bedfellows nonetheless, because I will say this movie places 2 slots higher than American Psycho.
Oh, interesting. I thought it would be the other way around.
Just saying. But as usual, if you have any commentary for us, good, bad, or otherwise, you can certainly write us at any of our socials at Gmode Podcast. You can find us on our email, greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us at our website, ronnieduncanstudios.com/Gmote Podcast. Let's move to some quick remaining questions. Frankly, we already answered most of mine, like a modern recast. We already talked about the timeline of the movie. We kind of talked about theories as to why these two hate each other. So does anybody have any other remaining questions?
So mine is kind of, it might seem a little left field, but I didn't really pick up on it until I did this rewatch, and then I went online, and there are other film nerds who feel this way. Apparently, there is like a homoerotic tension between Balin and Johnny, And I felt that way. Not on the earlier watch. I've seen this multiple times. And maybe it's just because I was so hyper-focused on Gilda that I wasn't really paying too much attention to how Balin and Johnny were reacting. But at first, Johnny's almost jealous of Gilda for Balin's attention. Like, at first, he's almost like three's a crowd, meaning she's like getting in the way of his relationship with Balin because, you know, before the toast to the wench, she's talking about how, oh, you know, just a few weeks ago we toasted to the three of us, you, me, and your friend, and now we're toasting to her. So it almost feels like when your best friend brings another friend over to your house and you're like, oh, who's this? I didn't ask for this. I wanted just my friend. And it felt like it could just be like I wanted to just be his closest ally, and now he has a wife and that's not possible. But it just felt like jealousy for Balin than it felt like jealousy for Gilda until things start to progress and it's very clear he's kind of like monitoring Gilda's behavior and he's starting to see that seeing her dance with other men. But it also, like, before he even sees her, he gets kind of upset that he took a wife and doesn't even see who the wife is yet, and he's just kind of like, oh, great, like a new person I don't want to deal with. And there's just sort of the way he's just so willing to do his bidding for him, so like off the bat, and he kind of rises in the ranks even though Balin has clearly a staff of goons that will just do whatever. And yet why is this new guy now the right-hand man? It seems like, I feel like they had something else going on. Even if it wasn't actually happening, I just had this weird feeling that their relationship was also just weirder than just the Gilda and Johnny backstory.
I had picked up a little bit on the concept of the dagger being rather phallic.
Yes.
And ultimately, it did not get lost on me that the phallic ended up stabbing him in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So now I will say, if we're going to do a modern reversion or, I don't know, revisit of the film, let's put Luca Guadagnino in charge instead of an American Psycho remake. And I'm thinking either Matt Bomer or Pedro Pascal for Balin.
Yeah, that could be good.
Get this real love triangle going.
Exactly. Well, I think it would actually benefit from it being either explicit or it's just clear that he has like a power boner for Balin. It's less about whether he actually is attracted to him, but he doesn't have money or power of his own, so the closest he can get is sort of being under Balin and sort of operating as his, like, an extension of himself. So I think Johnny clearly has an ego and does not like to feel lesser than others, and I think operating with this sort of like protection of this high-powered man, he likes that. And then somebody can potentially, because also I think it's kind of implying that if Gilda is caught cheating, Johnny isn't doing a good enough job of looking after her, so Johnny's going to get fired. I feel like that's also kind of a tension, that it's not just that he is concerned that Balin will be humiliated, or that Johnny is jealous, or that Gilda might get beat by her husband or maybe even killed by him because he's a very dangerous person. But I think that it kind of is like, I told you to look after her and you let her go home with these like rando dudes. I also don't think the ending is believable in the absolute slightest. Where I think it goes wrong is Balin fake killing himself with the plane. I'm always really engaged, but until he like flies into the sunset, I'm always kind of like, and this is the part of the story I don't like, until we get back to put the blame on Mame. I feel like it would have been stronger if maybe Johnny and Gilda decided to team up against Balin, because it's clear Balin has been kind of using them like puppets, and he is clearly a psychopath. Like, he has no human emotion. He even says hate is the only thing that's ever warmed him, and that he thought it would be fun to watch Johnny kill Gilda because he wanted his like plaything to kill his other plaything. That is some Dexter level Ted Bundy behavior. They could have leaned harder, like in a more progressive era. I think they could have leaned harder into the potential violence of this man, because he is not well at all saying stuff like that. And I think because he's like a traditional villain, it kind of maybe rolls over a bit because, like, you know, he's almost like a Bond villain. He's so cartoonish with like a face scar and a cane knife. But if a normal person was like, oh, I want my best friend to kill my wife because I think it would be fun, you'd be like, you need to be in an institution yesterday. And this guy certainly does. So I would have liked to see if we could have rewritten it. That at that point, instead of him fake dying to escape his business problems, the two playthings, like, team up and get him, kind of either maybe get him arrested for the crap he does or even find a way to kill him. And then I think it would be almost like a little bit more noir, that they learn to turn their hate on, like, the real villain, which is this guy who clearly is not right in the head. Instead of this, like, he's dead, but he's back. And then he's mad, and then he's dead. And now they're gonna be married and happy, ?
How about Christoph Waltz as Bellin?
Oh, that would be great. That would be great.
Yeah, he could definitely play it if you... Well, is Bellin... It's never really mentioned what ethnicity he is, if he's, like, another one of these post-war transplants. If he's supposed to be somewhat German, then yes, it would make sense. And the way that MacReady is in the film, you would think that a like for like, but that's why I suggested somebody else that could possibly do some of the other aspects of the character. I don't know. You could play around with it, but I think there is a very strong possibility that you could redo this, rewrite the script just slightly, and take it kind of out of the 40s. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be there, especially with that kind of, if you're going to really make a bisexual love triangle, it probably needs to be more modern, but you can still make it like the Cartel or something to that effect. And I think that would work here.
Yeah, I got
and not Emilia Perez.
Yes. Yeah, I got the vibe. No. Oh, man. I got the vibe that Munson is a German name, so I thought he's either...
Sure.
And so he also has a facial scar, which I think indicates one or two things. One, he is a World War I vet, and that's how he got it. Or there were actual Nazis who would slice their own faces to look more terrifying and more like, oh, I got this in battle, even though they didn't. And maybe he's now in Argentina because he needed to escape what was going on. So it's kind of questionable, but I'm more willing to bet that he's a World War I vet, given his age. And maybe that made him a little, like, hardened to life, and he is, you know, doesn't really care about people anymore because he just had to shut that off. But I think, yeah, it doesn't have to be in World War II. I think it could be basically any time, and we could keep these sort of archetypes alive.
And Danny Trejo as Uncle Pio. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank our guest for being on with us for her now 5th time. Anything that you have coming up or anything else that you'd like to plug here quickly?
No, you can follow me at TWriteRepeat on Instagram and X, though I'm not always that active on X. I have 3 books out, Shadowcast, Deadringer, and The Devil Used to Know, all on Amazon. I'm working on another, but I do not have any idea when I will get that done.
Yes. So be on the lookout for all of that new stuff, as we're hoping to have you back next season. Otherwise, some very quick... Well, actually, let's just skip remaining thoughts for the week, Dad. I don't really have anything to say, and I think we have some hard outs, so that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week, for our 310th episode, we welcome back CLP contributor and the host and creator of Cinemas, Mike Emmel, to discuss Yojimbo from 1961, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Written and directed by Akira Kurosawa with Ryuzo Kikushima and Hideo Oguni. Cinematography by Kazuo Miyagawa. Music by Masuro Sato. Editing by Akira Kurosawa. Starring Toshiro Mifune, Tatsuya Nakadai, Yoko Tsukasa, and Isuzu Yamada. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at ronniedinkinstudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Brian Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.